Hey everybody, today I'll be reviewing 6 games in rapid succession. I'll be talking about Madam Ching, Keltis, Pay Dirt, Okanagan, Mining Colony, and Trails of Tucana. And I'll be doing this from my least favourite to my most favourite. But before I get into the reviews of the games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer here in the UK. And if you use my link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. But let's get started on the reviews. Okay, so first up we have Pay Dirt. Now this is a game with a pretty cool theme actually, as we're trying to excavate the land, trying to extract the gold nuggets from it. And this is like a worker placement with a small degree of engine building game. And basically the concept is that on your player board you're going to have these different kind of columns here with these 3 different pieces of machinery, I suppose. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to feed these tiles across your machinery. Each time you shift it along, you're going to have to place a worker there. And the more you load these machines up, the more they're going to kind of, decay, I suppose, or weather. And then you need to spend more workers in order to maintain them, to keep them ticking along nicely, or basically, risk them breaking down. So that was quite a cool concept as well. And one of the things I really did like about this game actually is the fact that the winning condition is to get the most gold nuggets. However, in order to keep, upgrading your player board and making yourself more efficient, you need to have money. So you need to sell the gold nuggets, which are essentially your points, in order to have funds, in order to buy new things for your player board. So that was quite cool. I like that kind of trade-off between, victory conditions and, cash. And that was really nice. But that is pretty much where the good stuff of the game ends, because this game has one of the most arbitrary and heavy-handed examples of a catch-up mechanism that I think I've ever seen. So essentially, whoever's winning the game, in fact, everybody has to draw one of these hardship cards. It'll be like a draft. So I think the first person, or the person who's in the worst position, as in points wise, will get the first draft, and then it'll pass on to the next person, and so on. So it means that the person winning each round will get the worst of those hardship cards, and those hardship cards are just completely debilitating. They're so punishing and brutal to the point where you pretty much may as well throw away your next turn. And that kind of really did ruin the game for me, because it felt like you were never really trying to do extremely well, because if you were, you just know you're going to get absolutely hit by a freight train. So yeah, unfortunately that was too much for me to overcome. But I love the key concepts in this game, cool theme, a different idea of using the worker placement. But ultimately I didn't think it was pieced together terribly well. And there was another big issue with this game where a lot of the upgrade tiles that you'd buy, the deck of the tiles wasn't layered, so it meant that sometimes the best tiles that are perfect for you would come up really early in the game. You'd buy them, and then you'd never need to go back to that spot. So it felt like that whole part of the game was completely void once you were settled on what you had. So I would have found it a lot more interesting if the tiles were constantly getting better, meaning that there's always that pressure of selling gold to upgrade it. When's the best time to do it? And this game just completely had, it didn't explore that part of the game at all, which I thought was a bit of a wasted opportunity. But I'd love to see this game re-implemented in a second edition or something, because there is promise here. But ultimately, this is just not good enough, I'm afraid. So that is Pay Dirt. Okay, so next up we have Madam Ching by Bruno Cathala and Ludovic Maublanc. This one is a card-driven board game, 30 to 45 minutes, 2 to 4 players. A gorgeous artwork, as you can see here, by Vincent Dutrait. The hand management in this game is quite interesting, I suppose, as you have a small hand of cards, and each card has a number assigned to it. And what you're essentially trying to do is you are kind of pioneering this ship across the sea. And you're going to be playing these cards in sequential order, so going from low to high. And some cards will basically make you go completely horizontal across the board, and some will make you go kind of downwards and diagonally. And you're basically trying to get as far as you can on your voyage in order to collect these points tokens. And they're going to give you, your points essentially. You're also trying to match up these symbols, because if you do, you can get these bonuses here. But the kind of twist in this game was that if you started to run out of cards from your hand, you wanted to make sure that you would start to think forward and start to build up your hand for your next voyage. So you can start on a nice low number, meaning you'll probably go further on your next trip. So it was a pretty natty idea, I suppose, but as with most Bruno Cathala games, they just do not resonate with me. And I ended up leaving the game feeling a bit just kind of numb, really. I just get nothing from his games, and yeah, this was another example of that. I also thought that almost like the crescendo or the tempo of the game was a little bit off, because there wasn't really much kind of things you would build up for, and very early in the game you can take quite a big voyage, and it wasn't like a game where you keep getting better and better and better as you went on to feel more satisfying. And in fact, it was almost the other way around, because quite early on in the game, all the high-value point tiles will get taken by the players, meaning that later in the game, only the smaller ones were left. So it kind of felt like an anti-climax. And again, you weren't getting better. You kind of almost felt like, it was less satisfying as the game went on, which felt a bit strange for me. But yeah, this game really didn't leave an impression on me. I'm not going to say it's bad, but it was just like a meh for me. 5 out of 10, and nothing to write home about. Next up, we have Mining Colony by Dr. Steve Finn. So this is like a polyomino, puzzly style game. 1 to 4 players, takes around 40 minutes to play. Lovely production here. But basically, this is a lot like a lot of other polyomino style games. But in this one, you almost have to like build this foundation on your player board by drafting these tiles. Then you've got all these other little components here which want to be placed in certain ways on your player board to score you points. And they are finite, so that you need to get there before the other players. I suppose the twist on this game is the way you acquire things in the first place, because it is done through this draft based on simultaneous card play. So everyone's going to have a hand of cards. You reveal things all at the same time. The higher number will get the first pick. Now, I did like that concept, and that's generally a mechanism that I tend to enjoy anyway. But the problem with this one was that when you draft things, you had to draft them in bulk. So you'd have like one of these tiles with one of these pieces and one of these pieces, and you can't have one without the other. And what that often meant was that if somebody, or say you played your really high card because there was one piece or one lot that you really wanted, and somebody trumped you to get that, you would often be left with a bunch of pieces that were no use for you at all, and then you've wasted your best card. And yeah, I get it, that's normally, that's part of the tension, but it felt like that was consistently happening. And, normally I think if you play a high card and you still get trumped, you should have a good backup plan rather than just, having the dregs what's left. So it felt a little bit like that for me. It felt like, it just didn't plan out the way I would have wanted it to. And on top of that, this is like a rather simple game. Again, we've seen this kind of thing again and again. But I think the production was a little bit off with this game, as I'm trying to open the box here, where there is a ton of pieces in this box, and it felt like a little bit bloated for what it was. Like, you literally have so many tokens, and when you want to get a little filler game on the board, you don't want this amount of stuff just crowding your table. And it just was a little bit of a a jarring thing for me. So yeah, it didn't quite fit right for me. And recently I played some better polyomino style games, such as Alice's Garden. That one's completely blown this one out of the water, and I've just rendered it useless. So yeah, therefore I wouldn't really recommend picking up Mining Colony. There's just too much competition, and it's just too busy on the table. Okay, so next up we have Trails of Tucana. 1 to 8 players, takes around 15 minutes to play. And this is a simple flip and write style game that will take place on a sheet that looks like this. And what you're essentially trying to do, or what you do each round, is you reveal 2 cards from the top of the deck here, which will show the different terrain types. And what you need to do is you need to draw a line in between those 2 terrains, so as in a water and a sand. So what you'd normally do, you draw a line between the water and the sand, like I've done here. And the idea of the game is that you're trying to connect all these different symbols back to one of these towns on the border, represented by these letters. And each time you do that, you're going to tick off one of these things. So the first time it's going to get you a point at the end of the round. And then the second time you do it, it's going to get you more points, but it's also going to give you a bonus road to draw. So it is kind of this game where you are building up more and more as the game goes on, trying to connect these routes together to try and get as much done as possible. You also get points based on connecting letter to letter. So you can see here that I've connected the E to the E here, and therefore I've gotten these points here, these extra 10 points. But there's also going to be some public objective cards available, like the first person to get the E to the E connected, that kind of thing. Or even these bonus rules where you can try and get shape to shape connected like so. And I suppose one of the things I do like about this game is the scoring system, because you don't actually score your points immediately. At the end of the round, you see what you've got and then you score your points. And then in the end of the second round, you score those points again. So it does have this kind of forward momentum there. That's pretty much everything the game has to offer. There's 2 different modes of the game. You can play the basic one like this on the Isla Petite map, which you play 2 rounds, or you can play on the larger map here, the Isla Grande map, which you'll play over 3 rounds. So I actually do think that the 2-round game is much better because, to be honest, the 3rd round doesn't add anything. It just adds, it just extends the game by a third, and it doesn't really feel like it adds anything to the experience. But this one you can actually get played in about 15 minutes, which is quite nice. But I do really like the game, and it was one I've had. I've been on the fence with, am I going to keep it because it is so easy to get to the table? It is quite breezy. But ultimately, I think, I played this one more time recently just to solidify my thoughts. And I thought, you know what, it's good, but I don't get a tremendous amount of fun from it. It's just fine. And there's some other just as quick games really that I'd rather play, such as Get On Board, which leave have a similar vibe to them. 20 minutes, simple flip and right style game. But yeah, this one's nice, but I think you can get a bit too much done on your turns. And it's just not really that much to explore because, you only get 2 maps, the small one and the big one. Yeah, I know the variability is based on the flip of the cards, but yeah, that's it really. There is some scope for cool combos as you start to build or connect all your routes together, and then all of a sudden you get a bunch of these bonus things. But, when you're finishing a game and you've got all the different objectives done, and a couple of town paths done as well as a couple of bonuses, it feels like, what more can you really do with this one? So a nice filler, but ultimately not one that's going to kind of stay around forever, in my opinion. So that is the Trails of Tucana. I rate this one probably about a 6, maybe a 6.5 out of 10. Okay, so penultimately we have Keltis by Dr. Rainer Knizia. This is a 2 to 4 player game, takes around 30 minutes to play, at least according to the box. And this game is essentially a board game variant of Lost Cities, which is the classic Knizia card game for 2 players. Now, this game uses the same card system as you have a hand of cards of the different coloured suits. And you're basically trying to play them in numerical order, from either from low to high or high to low. You can play with them with gaps in between the sequence, but you can never go back on yourself. So if I go 1, 2, 3, maybe 7, 8, I can never go back and fill in the 6. But I suppose the twist in this game is that everybody is sharing from the same pool of cards. So of course, there's inevitably going to be competition over the same suits. And if you commit to one of these tracks by starting one of these runs, then you're initially going to start with negative points, but eventually you'll start breaking into the positive points the more you get. And normally, I'm being lazy here, there'll be tokens scattered all over the board, and when you reach certain checkpoints, you'll collect gems, and the gems will give you kind of a set collection bonus here. Or you will reach these little kind of clover symbols, where if you reach one point, you can move up another one of your tokens, or you can even move the same one again. So you can get these kind of chain reactions, and I really do like that part of the game. Ultimately, I think some of the tension is lost from this when you are playing multiplayer. My main incentive for this game was to have a game of Lost Cities, but that could cater up to 4 players. Which, yeah, this does that, but ultimately I think it feels a little bit too slow and plodding when you are playing with 3 or 4 players, in contradiction to the 2-player game, which does feel much more punchy, much more snappy. And also, I think, again, the tension of holding cards back into your hand to prevent your opponent having them does come through stronger in a 2-player game. Now, there is a variant on this board as well, where you can play with this expansion map, which I thought was quite interesting, as you could dip in and out of the different colours. You can start on yellows, and then you can divert off into these ones and so on, and have the different kind of pathways, and a slightly different scoring method as well relating to the gems. But I thought this version of the game, although it was more interesting, I thought that it was a bit too slow and plodding. And I said the board game, or the box says the game takes 30 minutes. This one you're looking more of an hour, 45 minutes to an hour to play, which does start to drag on, and it does feel like it outstays its welcome when it comes to the last third of the game. It's a shame because I do love the concept of it, but yeah, not quite going to be strong enough to stay around. And another one I've been on the fence with, because I've probably had this in my collection for about a year now, but the last play I had of it was just too long, and therefore it has to go. So that is Keltis. Again, another one you're looking at a 6 to a 6.5 out of 10 for. And the final game I'm talking about is Okanagan, Valley of the Lakes. So this is a tile placement, area majority, and also set collection game. 2 to 4 players, takes around 45 minutes to play. And this game has a hell of a lot of upside. So mechanically, this game is smooth as silk. I love the way it flows. As you are drafting a tile and placing them on the communal board. So first of all, I love the way that you are sharing the map here. And whenever you place a tile, you are forced to put one of your pieces down. And these pieces are going to be in 3 different types. You've got these like cylinders, you've got these longer buildings, and you also have these just standard houses. And they all work in different ways. And the fact that you have to place one adds a bit more kind of meaning to each of your turns. Now the single cylinders here, they go right in the middle of the tile, but they will give you 1 influence in every different terrain type on that tile. The long ones go in between 2 different types of terrain, but they'll give you 2 influence in each of those 2 regions. And the houses only go on 1 type of terrain, but they give you 3 influence. So I love the way that the more concentrated you are, the more influence you have, but the more vague you are, leaving your options open, you have fewer influence. So that balancing is so well done. Now, what you're trying to do essentially is that when you close these regions off, as in, you have a completely encaptured area of water here, then if you have influence in that, you are going to be collecting these tokens that are within it. And then you're going to have these cards distributed at the start of the game, where the more tokens you collect of a certain type, it means you're going to get the points to the nth degree. You can collect it as many times as you like. But another twist on the game was that if you had the lowest influence in a region, then you would actually get the bonus on the reverse side of the stack of tiles. And that could be things such as, getting new objective cards. It could be taking tokens that you might want and that kind of thing. So I love the fact that sometimes you might want to actually deliberately lose these regions so that you get one of these bonuses. So this had like layer upon layer of mechanism that actually did come together really well. So you want the tile placement, then you want to have the area majority in order to get the set collection to score points. So yeah, that level of synergy between the mechanisms worked really well. So everything about it I pretty much like. Now there's one big issue I had with the game, and that is in relation to the objective cards. So at the start of the game you are given them pretty much randomly, which means that you're going to try and tailor yourself towards certain strategies. Now there are, I think halfway through the game, when you take a new kind of replenishment of player pieces, you can draw more cards and potentially replace the ones that you started with. And that actually does play a huge part in the game, because you can actually end up drawing tiles or drawing new cards which will perfectly synergize with things you've already collected. And that is purely based on the luck of the draw. So for example, I played a game of this one. I was collecting, I believe it was fish and something else. I ended up acquiring a ton of them. My other 2 cards were going really badly. I didn't get anything towards them at all. And then halfway through the game, I drew a card, which meant that card also needed fish and something else, which I just happened to have pure luck. And that pretty much doubled my points based purely on the luck of the card draw. So that did leave a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth. And I'm not sure if I'm willing to overcome that swinginess of the card draw, which is such a shame because everything else in this game is pretty much phenomenal. That has dragged it down at least a point and a half for me, to the point that I can't really wholeheartedly recommend it. But if you are willing to forgive that and bypass that, or maybe even house rule it somewhat, then I'm sure you can get a lot of enjoyment from the game. Because initially I was so impressed with this one, but when I did see that little chink in the armour, it was just hard for me to overcome, and it's not hit the table since. Yeah, because of those faults, it's going to drag it down to about a 6.5 out of 10. So that's it really. That's all the rapid reviews I'm going through on this episode. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Sorry if you wanted a full review on these games. I've just got too much to go through at the moment, so I'm trying to catch up through my back catalogue. But if you have enjoyed the review, please hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other content too. And for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.